Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu newspaper analysis for today. Before we begin analyzing the newspaper for today, I hope by now all of you are already a part of our Telegram channel. If you have still not joined the channel, you can use the link given in the description of the video. Become a part of this channel to get all the latest current affairs updates about the UPSC examination. Now, let's begin. Today's Hindu newspaper specifically is filled with a lot of news about election. As you know, the election results came out yesterday for Gujarat, Himachal Pradesh, and thus most of the editorials are actually talking about that. Thus, from the UPSC point of view, we have to ensure that we only pick out that news which is relevant for us. So, the first news from today's Hindu newspaper is about a World Bank report that has come out. This report, titled Migration and Development Brief, this report talks about the remittances received by nations around the world, especially with respect to India. Now, remittances, as you know, are the money that the nation's people, when they go out of the country, they send back to the country. For example, if Indians who are working in Saudi Arabia, US, Canada, UK, etc., when they earn money from their salary, they send that money back to India for their relatives, for their family. That comes under the category of remittances. Now, usually year after year, we see India is one of the largest recipients of remittances around the entire world. And the same has been said by this World Bank report as well. The report says for the first time ever, remittances to India are expected to reach $100 billion in 2022. This mark has never been met by India in the past. Last year, this was about $89.4 billion, and this time it will touch about $100 billion. Most of the remittances coming to India come from nations such as UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, and then US and UK. Now, these countries form the Gulf Cooperation Council, where a large number of Indians work in blue collar jobs. Then we also have US, UK, where a large number of people work in high end jobs, especially in the IT sector. Now, the remittances around the world and not just India are expected to touch close to $800 billion in 2022. This also indicates the fact that world is getting more and more globalized. People are now going across borders, working in different countries and sending back the money. In 2020, because of the pandemic, the remittances had hit a very low point. But since the market is now coming back, the remittances numbers are also now going up. If you look at the other nations that have received remittances very high, second rank goes to Mexico. Then we have China, Philippines, Egypt. These are the nations from where people usually go outside, work, and they send the money back. Now, the report talks about various reasons. Why is it that the remittances coming back to India have increased considerably year after year? First, the gradual reopening of various sectors. As I discussed, 2020 was a pandemic year where almost the entire economy of the world was closed down. Now that the economy is opening up, the jobs are coming back, people are now getting their wages back, it is very obvious that the remittances will come back. Second reason, since people saw what actually can happen during the pandemic, when the people were short of money, people did not have savings, many people have now realized the significance of saving more money and sending more money back to their family. So it seems that the migrants are now more determined to send back the money as compared to what they were earlier. Thus, we are seeing people now spending lesser and saving more and sending more money back to their houses. Then there's a third reason as well. This reason is, if you compare in the last 5 to 6 years, what has happened is number of Indians going out of India for jobs, their profile has actually changed drastically. Earlier, a lot of Indians used to go outside India to work in low skill paying jobs. Now, low skill jobs means that they would get a lower salary. I'll just give you an example. Like we just have the football World Cup that's going on in Qatar. Now, to build all those football stadiums in Qatar, a lot of labor was actually called from nations such as India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, etc. So thousands and lakhs of Indians would have gone there. Now, when they actually go and work, they also send some money back to their family. But those are low skill jobs, so they don't get a lot of money. As compared to that, now what is happening is more and more people are actually going into high skill jobs in Europe, USA, in the IT sector, and in management, and all those kind of sectors which are much higher paying. That is why we are seeing two trends. First trend is that the remittances are increasing because the salary of the people is increasing. The second trend is money coming back to India from nations such as US and UK is increasing as compared to money coming back from the Gulf nations. So contribution of the Gulf nations, for example, has dropped from 54% to 28% when you compare 2016 to 2020 numbers. On the other hand, contribution coming in from US and UK has been increasing. In fact, last financial year, US was a top source of remittances to India. All these reasons actually make up for these high numbers. Not just this, there is also one more factor. As you would have seen in the past few months, there was a great depreciation in the value of the rupee as compared to dollar. Now, the migrants took advantage of that, and knowing fully well that now if they send money back to India in terms of dollars, they would actually get more Indian rupee in exchange. That is why they also took advantage of this depreciation of the Indian rupee. All this data has been given in the World Bank report that talks about how the remittances and why the remittances have actually increased. Now, this report that we are talking about is called the World Bank's Migration and Development Brief. It is prepared by the World Bank and provides an update on the areas of migration and remittances flow throughout the entire world. They publish the report twice a year, so it actually comes at an interval of 6 months. Remittances, as I told you, are considered as transfers that are made by migrants to their home country. They mainly have two components. One, personal transfer in cash or in kind. Or second, the remittances can also be in the form of compensation given to the employees, which is the income of the workers who work in another country for a limited period of time. Now, in this entire remittance debate, there is a one more aspect that you have to understand. Increasing remittances also indicate towards one more thing. That is, more and more people from your country are going outside the country to work. That is how they are actually sending the money back, right? So remittances is actually very closely related to brain drain. That is, at the same time, if those people would have been working in India, maybe they would have contributed to more job generation, to more economic growth of India. But now they have opted to go outside India to get better jobs and they are sending remittances. So, on one hand, yes, remittances are good. They help the country in increasing its foreign exchange. But on the other hand, it also brings a question to our mind. Is it the responsibility of the government to provide more opportunities to such talented people to stay in India, or is it good that they are going outside? Now, this is a report from the RBI. These numbers tell you which are the nations from where most of the money is coming back to India, led by US, and UAE, UK, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, etc. The next article that we have is about G20. As you know, since the Indonesia G20 summit got over, we are filled with these articles about G20, about India taking up the presidency of G20 once again. This article in the Hindu newspaper tells what can India actually offer as the president of the G20 for the 2023 summit. By now, I'm sure all of you know, G20 was established in 1999 by seven nations: Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, and the US. And their idea was to come together after 1997-98 financial crisis that mainly hit the Southeast Asian nations. The idea was that the world now is connected and we must have our economic policies aligned with each other to ensure that such global economic crisis does not occur. Because nowadays, whenever an economic crisis occurs in any one country, it impacts all the countries and it does not just stay limited to one single nation. And that is why the idea was that our economic policies should be aligned with each other. So, when G20 was first formed, it was supposed to be a forum for economic policies only. But over the years, we have seen it expand and other issues are also discussed in G20 summits. For example, now issues such as trade, climate change, sustainable development, health, agriculture, energy, all of these are discussed. The presidency of the G20 rotates amongst the member nations one by one, and India has been given the responsibility to play the president's role in the upcoming 2023 summit. Now, the G20 is one of that groups that does not have their own permanent secretariat. Now, what that means is that whichever nation becomes a president has complete freedom to decide on the agenda to be discussed, has complete freedom to decide on the theme. So India would decide the theme of this meeting, the points of discussion, and any line of discussion that we want to take. The Prime Minister already has released that India will follow the theme of One Earth, One Family, One Future and LIFE. Now, what is LIFE? If you remember reading in the newspapers a few months back, the Prime Minister of the country talked about lifestyle for environment. What this means is that when we talk about climate change, when we talk about deteriorating environment, we also have to understand that not just the companies but common people are also responsible for it. So Prime Minister had said that if we want to stop climate change, we also need to bring in a change in our lifestyle, the way we eat, the way we work, the way we travel, the way that we actually eat and consume things, all of that needs to be taken into consideration because all of that plays a very important role in the climate change. So, for example, you're traveling alone. It doesn't make sense for you to have a private plane for you to travel alone. If you're going out alone, it doesn't make sense for you to actually travel in a very big car. Rather than that, you should rather share it with others so that environment may not be harmed. This entire idea is called LIFE, that is lifestyle for environment. The Prime Minister of the country would want to elaborate on these two during the G20 summit. Now, it won't be that easy for India to play the president's role because of all things that are going around India. For example, our relationship with China has still not become normal ever since the Galwan clashes. In fact, in the SCO summit, the Prime Minister of India and the Chinese president did not even talk to each other. At least in this G20 summit that took place in Indonesia, there was a moment caught on the camera where the two exchanged their pleasantries. So it might signal that the India China relationship might improve, but we have to see how it works out before our G20 presidency. Similarly, in this G20 summit, the world was divided into two parts about Ukraine Russia war. That still remains a challenge for India, and how would India actually tackle that? Now, the G20 summit mainly has two parallel tracks where they talk about two things. First is the finance track. This is a track where the central bank governors and the finance ministers usually meet. They talk about the economic policies, which was the original aim of G20. Second track is called Sherpa. Now, Sherpa basically is a representative appointed by every country where they would send their representative to discuss issues on behalf of their country. These can be multiple issues, be it sustainable development, climate change, food security, etc. For example, India had appointed Amitabh Kant from Niti Aayog fame to actually become India's Sherpa. So Sherpas also meet to discuss about the different types of issues that they want to discuss. And there's a finance track meeting that still takes place with the finance ministers of the different nations and also the governors of the central banks of all the nations coming together. The G20, since it is such an important grouping, also has participation from groups such as UN, IMF, OECD, etc. Now, I also wanted to discuss with you specifically the G20 theme and logo that has been released by the Government of India. As you can see on the screen, this is what the G20 logo looks like, released by the Government of India for 2023. This has the words Vasudev Kutumbakam and the theme One Earth, One Family, One Future. As you can see from this logo, it actually has India's national colors, saffron, green and white, apart from blue. It has the word Bharat written in Devanagari script and the theme of India's G20 presidency, Vasudev Kutumbakam, One Earth, One Family, One Future, has also been mentioned here. As you know, this text, Vasudev Kutumbakam, has been taken from ancient Sanskrit text of Maha-Upanishad. Also, it affirms the value of all human lives, animals, plants, microorganisms being one in this entire world. Now, the Prime Minister has also said that the theme that India would want to explore is that the world right now has enough for everyone's need but not enough for everyone's greed. At a time when we are seeing high prices for food, we are seeing high prices for fuel, the world actually fighting with each other. The Prime Minister wants to give a message that if we all work together, this world entirely is one single family. And India is looking to be a guiding light in that aspect to bring the world together. Now it remains to be seen how successful is India in bringing the world together and highlighting this theme once the 2023 G20 summit takes place. The next article that we have here is a comment from a Supreme Court judge while hearing a petition on appointment of ad hoc judges in the High Courts. Now, the Supreme Court was hearing a petition. Petition was filed by NGO Lok Prahari. The petition said that Article 224A talks about appointment of ad hoc judges in the High Courts. But even today, the High Courts in India have large number of vacancies, because of it there are many pending cases. And we should do something about that, and we should ensure that the appointment of judges in the High Courts actually becomes much smoother. So the Supreme Court in that aspect has asked the government of India to think out of the box and think about how can we have more ad hoc judges. The Supreme Court has said that we may ask senior lawyers to act as ad hoc judges in the High Court for some time to ensure that the pendency of the cases is curtailed. But the problem here is, as you would know, senior advocates, well-known lawyers earn a huge amount of money. It is just not possible for the government to match their salary when they are appointed as High Court or even as Supreme Court judges. Thus, the government of India has to make a lucrative offer to ask them to come as ad hoc judges on the benches and work for maybe 2 years so that they can compromise just 2 years of earning and then they can go back. The Supreme Court also said that retired judges who are willing to come back to the bench should also be called upon so that they can also help the government and the judiciary in resolving all the pending cases. Not just this, Supreme Court also said that the blame has to go to the government as well. The Supreme Court said, recently we have seen that whenever the Chief Justice of India recommends a name to the President of India for appointment in the High Court judges, they actually see a delay from the side of the government. We have increasingly seen how government is actually sending back the recommendations to the collegium, and the Supreme Court does not seem to be happy about that. The Supreme Court said, once Chief Justice of India recommends a name, it should actually be appointed in a matter of days, and the government should not keep sending it back, which is the case right now. It has been happening increasingly, specifically for the High Court judges as well. In April last year, the Supreme Court of India pointed out that the vacancy in the High Court was over 20%, and there were many cases that have been pending for over 5 years, and we need to appoint more ad hoc judges in order to resolve that issue. Now, the problem is we usually discuss mostly about the Supreme Court and their appointment of judges. We overlook the fact that in the High Courts also there are large number of vacancies that have not been curtailed. For example, if you look at the High Courts of Patna, Calcutta, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, they have high number of vacancies, because of which there are cases that are pending for over 5 years and many cases that are pending for over 10 years as well. The Constitution of India under Article 224A talks about appointment of retired judges in the High Courts that can work as ad hoc judges. As per the article, the Chief Justice of the High Court for any state, with the previous consent of the President, request a person who has held the office of judge of that court or any other high court to sit as judge in that state. Now again, this article does not talk about advocates. It only talks about retired judges. This is what the Supreme Court was pointing towards. That yes, it only talks about judges, but we may also explore the option of requesting the advocates to work so that they can also help to resolve the pending cases in the high courts in India. Now, the ad hoc judges usually, whenever they are appointed, they take up those cases only which are very old so that they can actually use all their experience and expedite those cases and solve them in a fast manner. Usually over 5-year-old cases are given to these judges, but that is not always a rule. The Chief Justice of the High Court can decide which cases would go to them, but usually again, as I said, older cases are given to them. If you look at the Department of Justice data, Allahabad High Court has the most number of vacancies with 66 out of 160 total seats which are still to be filled up. They have over 10 lakh cases that are pending without a surprise. Bombay High Court has 37 vacancies. Then several High Court like Delhi, Calcutta, Punjab and Haryana have over 40% vacancies as we saw. The smaller High Courts which don't have a lot of judges, Sikkim, Tripura have 0 vacancies, but again because of the size of those high courts. But otherwise, we still see a lot of vacancies in all these high courts across the entire country. The next article that we have is Sri Lanka saying that they will try to resume the talks with India on economic and technological cooperation agreement. As you know, Sri Lanka is going through a very, very tough time economically, and they are looking towards their neighbors, their friends, to sign as many free trade agreements or as many preferential trade agreements as possible. Thus, Sri Lanka has announced that they'll be focusing on free trade agreements and FDIs coming in from India, China, etc., to make sure that they are able to recuperate their economy in the manner that they actually hope to. Sri Lanka will resume the trade negotiation with other nations as well, such as Thailand, Singapore, etc., so that in the future they can become a part of groups such as the RCEP. As you know, RCEP is kind of a free trade agreement led by the ASEAN nations. India also is not a member of the RCEP. We decided to stay away from it in the last moment. For Sri Lanka specifically, India and China remain the two most important countries when it comes to trade. These two are the biggest sources of import for Sri Lanka. In 2021, Sri Lanka imported goods worth $4.74 billion from India, while their exports, on the other hand, was less than $1 billion. So they are thinking if they might be able to sign other agreements with India, maybe their trade will become easier and cheaper for both the nations. Now, the two sides already have a free trade agreement since the year 2000 that has led to expanding of trade between the two sides in the areas of infrastructure, connectivity, transport, health, etc. India usually has been among Sri Lanka's largest trading partners in the SAARC region specifically. In 2020, India was Sri Lanka's second largest trading partner with a bilateral merchandise trade of over $3.5 billion. India is Sri Lanka's third largest export destination after US and UK as well. India also sends a lot of money in the form of foreign direct investment to Sri Lanka. Thus, Sri Lanka is a lot dependent on India for its economic prosperity. Now, if you look at the current numbers of exports to Sri Lanka from the side of India, you can see here it's a pretty robust number. It has increased from 28.3 billion rupees in August to 31.16 billion rupees in September. Also, these are the commodities that we usually export to Sri Lanka, so do make a note of that as well. Non-basmati rice, then we also have the gems, jewelry, etc. that come in. Apart from that, we also have manufactured goods, engineered goods, chemicals, gems, rough diamond. These are the main things that we usually export to Sri Lanka in large numbers. As you would have read recently, Sri Lanka is also trying to take more loan from the IMF. For that, they need guarantees from India and China as well to make sure that IMF is ready to give them a loan. In order for Sri Lanka to come back on its feet, to go back to the robust economy it was, it has to ensure that the trade relationship with these nations as India and China become better. Specifically, that they don't have to pay a lot of taxes and preferential treatment is given to them whenever it comes to these kind of trades. These are the important articles on the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number 1. 2023 presents a chance for India to walk the talk on one earth, one family, one future. Comment. Second, while increasing remittances is a good sign for India's foreign exchange reserves, it also points out towards a problem of brain drain in India. Do you agree? Elaborate. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Also, do make use of the student portal where you can post answers to these questions and you can check each other's answers and give each other feedback and learn from your mistakes. The link for this portal where you can post your answers is given in the description of the video. Do make sure that you use that and increase your activity on this portal so that you can learn new ways on how to write answers and give each other feedback. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day ahead.